Hi, I'm indie fantasy author Melinda Kucsera. Welcome back to Fantasy Lore and More. And today we're talking to C.N. Rowan, and we're going to be hearing about his dark urban fantasy series, Imperfect Magic. So, hey, welcome C.N. Rowan, and let's hear about Imperfect Magic. I'm curious. Why is it imperfect? I have questions.
Well, I can answer straight away. The answer is that the character in question used to be a perfect. And a perfect was what they called themselves at the time, the good Christians, which history is now labelled as the Cathars, which was a heretical Christian movement in the Occitan, the south of France, in the 12th century, which the church eradicated with extreme prejudice in the Albigensian Crusades, the only crusades ever that were used against another group of Christians. And the priests at that time were called the Perfects. And our main character, Paul Bonhomme, was a perfect during the Albigensian Crusades, and then, for reasons which become clear in Imperfect Magic, has ended up reincarnating each time he dies since in the nearest dead body, has been alive for the last 800 years and is distinctly, definitely not perfect anymore. Thus the series titled The Imperfect Cathar, and each book is titled Imperfect something. So book one is Imperfect Magic.
So, all right. So I got a question. So why were the Cathars used as heretical? Like what did they believe or do, or they just didn't, or did they just not like them? Because sometimes the Catholic Church was like that, you know. If your friends weren't in power, you got labeled a heretic, and okay, now we gotta get rid of you.
I must say there is a school of thought at the moment within historians that the Cathars never really existed. That in fact that was how Christianity had been practiced at that period for hundreds of years there, who were disconnected from the big kind of metropolitan centres. And at that time, as Christianity was being, formalised, it took hundreds of years to reach out. But I'm basing it on the more traditional view of Catharism, which is that effectively they believed in a number of things that the Roman Church thought was pretty wacky, like dualism, so two gods, a good god, an evil god. The evil god created the world. Reincarnation. They were vegetarian. They believed in equality between men and women. So women were allowed to be perfect, as were men. They believed that people who weren't the perfects, i.e. the average congregation, didn't have to avoid sinning. It wasn't a serious thing at all. The people who had to avoid sinning at all costs were the perfects, and who had to lead the perfect lives. So quite a reversal of the way that the church, with their influence and power, operated, obviously. And also, there was all sorts of political reasons. The Occitan was very, very tolerant towards people of other faiths and cultures in a way that, particularly, for example, Jews were allowed to own land, to be part of the government. In fact, at the same time as the Cathar heresy was happening in Occitan and the Languedoc, also in the Languedoc, in Montpellier, was the largest group and most influential group of Jewish scholars at the time, the Hashemite Provence, who were creating Kabbalah, which was a Jewish form of magic, and that was actually created at the same time as the Cathar heresy in the same part of France. So, so it was a very tolerant area, and it always has been, and they didn't like that very much back then.
Wow, it sounds like there was a lot going on back then. It was a complicated time.
Interesting time. And I must hasten to add, you don't need to know all this history to read my books. And hopefully enough of what you do need to know is explained, because the books flash back between the present time and the past. And hopefully there is enough of what is explained in the past to make it clear without being a historical overload. You do not need to be some form of historical scholar to enjoy the books, I hope.
This is sounding very interesting. I like when there's some history in the urban fantasy where it gets a little bit historical. That's kind of neat. So let's meet our protagonist.
Okay, so what would you like? Do you want me to start with the blurb? Do you want me to start with the first chapter with the blurb?
Yeah, let's start with the blurb, because that introduces the book, and then let's dive into the excerpt and hear from the protagonist in their own words. Or whoever, if we're not we may not even start with the protagonist.
We do. It's a first person book.
Good.
It's first person present tense.
Okay.
So it's very much from the protagonist's own point of view. So the blurb. After hundreds of years of dying, you'd think I would have perfected it by now. One moment, I'm a heretical priest in the 12th century, hunted, hated. The next, I'm waking up in the nearest corpse, stuck in a cycle of instant reincarnation, popping back up like a tarnished penny. Fast forward 800 years, and you might think I've learned a thing or two. No. All I've learned is how to die far too easily, far too often. Now, my territory in the south of France is under threat, and I find myself trapped by impossible angel-made runes. If the angels have gone full red lightsaber evil, it might not only be my territory in danger, but the whole of reality itself. I need to stop whoever is behind this, and now. After all, you can't come back to life if there's nothing left to come back to. So that's the main blurb.
Wow. All right, I'm gonna hold my questions till after the. I have questions, but I'm gonna hold them to. I'm gonna be good and hold them to after the excerpt. Let's hear from the protagonist in their own words.
I have a question, which is, my book is quite sweary. There's quite a lot of bad language in it. Do I need to self-edit whilst I am reading?
No, I can mark it as what do I call it? There's a setting on Spotify where I can mark it as I have to read their guidelines again and see like how sweary is
quite sweary.
How sweary is it? How many what swears can we have in clean, and which ones do I have to tick the other box?
Yeah, I think you'll find that mine would definitely need ticking as sweary. There is
okay, then I'll tick the other box. This isn't live, so it's fine. So like listeners will know what they're getting into.
Perfect.
Let's proceed. I do want you to read it as written. I mean, unless you want to ad lib anything, because authors are allowed to do that. It's their book. If characters inspire them to add something, we're never gonna know till we read it.
I didn't want to stop reading and just see your face sort of drop in horror.
No, I can mark it explicit. I think that's the other option.
Okay, marvelous. Chapter 1. Toulouse, 8th of March, present day. A rancid seller re-evaluating some recent life decisions. Magic is an overpriced escort, glammed up to the nines and looking for a good time. It'll make you feel great. It'll flatter your ego, and there's plenty of times it'll blow your mind. The more you invest, both time and finances, the more it'll play the game, the more it'll feel like a genuine relationship until you think it really cares, that it honestly has your back. Don't be fooled. It's all just business. The thing about business deals is, sooner or later, you're going to get screwed over, however solid you think your relationship is. Not in the good sense either. Happens to the best of us. I mean, getting tortured to death by a shit wizard wasn't on my agenda when I blew in through the front door of his house, overpowered to the nines, a magic-wielding badass ready to fuck things up. Funny how things work out, and by funny, I mean agonizingly painful, like being suspended from a set of depressingly solid, rust-stained chains, currently doing interesting things to my various cracked and shattered ribs. And by interesting, I mean if how far out of alignment can you put parts of the human skeleton without it killing someone is one of your topics of interest. Incidentally, if it is, please stay the hell away from me and mine. The only thing allowing movement is the blood slickening my skin around my ankles and wrists. The cold iron strums my forearm bones like washboards played in a skiffle band, only even more annoying. Just about. Have you ever heard a busker on a skiffle board? Every time one plays, I want to shower them in coins, preferably heated up till they're white hot. My breathing's transition from burbling gargles to maraca-like rattles doesn't require centuries of medical expertise to recognize it as probably a bad sign. It's not just the agonizing pain that makes the basement I'm in depressing. Mildew is not the decor choice of optimists. Through the sheen of grimy sweat, stinging my one unswollen eye, the ethereal glow of magic sigils taunts me. Sneaky bastards. The language of the angels doesn't make for comfortable reading, at least for a mortal mind like mine. It does a damn good job of keeping me trapped in place, though. Said sigils, all intricate swirls around the sweeping curves of the Kabbalist lettering, are also light years beyond the capabilities of the spittle-flecked shithead of a mage standing before me. Working out he's incapable of having created the Enochian containment runes glowing on the walls isn't hard. I'm more surprised he's capable of walking without tripping over his own feet. Hell, one look at the complete fuck-up he made carving runes of persuasion into my flesh shows how rubbish he is. Top marks for gratuitous damage, must try harder regarding actual magical prowess. His efforts, displayed in inch-deep gashes across my skin, look like someone gave a spirograph set to an alcoholic deep in the DTs. They wouldn't compel me to talk even if he had the magical knowledge and artistic temperament to engrave them correctly, but even assuming he could master writing that level of magical script correctly without it making his brain explode, I'm still totally out of his league talent-wise. He's not got the power to force me to do anything. As he continues to rant and rave at me, trying to get me to tell him what he wants to know, wondering why the runes of persuasion aren't working. Simple answer, because he's a shit wizard. I temporarily zone out. And in a debate as to what is a worse form of torture, being physically sliced to ribbons or having to be this close to his body odor, distracts me. It's a tough call to make. The continued screaming up in my face brings me back to the situation at hand, while the rancid breath accompanying it is a painful reminder of the importance to brush after every meal, as well as being further evidence that cleanliness was an early offering on the altar in his quest for magical power. His scraggly, food-matted facial hair underlines that. He clearly feels a beard lends him an air of Rasputin-level dark mysticism, but I'd go more with drug-addled village idiot chic personally. He looks like Dr. Moreau got funky with a rat, a toad, and an incel. His failure at forcing me to answer his ridiculous questions has driven him from guy to avoid sitting next to in the pub to Jesus, Mary, and Joseph, get the fuck away from that lunatic in a relatively brief space of time. The erratic swaying of the gore-stained knife he keeps waving about would be disturbing enough, even if it wasn't my gore doing the staining. I was bloody attached to that gore. Tell me what you are. The vein at his temple throbs like his head is about to pop. Sadly, I doubt I'll ever get that lucky. You're human, else you'd have never found my lair and been rendered helpless by my power. His power. Puh, what a load of bollocks. I'm not sure how these runes are restraining me, but one thing's certain, it's not because of his power. The knives, drunken, dancing, weaves closer to my one remaining good eye. You don't need to see to speak, creature. The squeaky tone, his voice cracking like an adolescent hitting the first agonies of puberty, doesn't really aid him in his attempt to be menacing. I chuckle, sending little tributaries of blood dribbling from the corner of my mouth to join the river currently streaming down my body. Your lair. Are you serious? What are you, a fucking Bond villain? No, wait, don't tell me. You're an alpha lone wolf or coyote, misunderstood by a society that will one day regret it ever dare reject your magnificent superiority. I flick my eyes up and down his spindly form. A filthy magician's robe that looks suspiciously like a hastily altered threadbare dressing gown hangs from his bony shoulders. It doesn't give him quite the aura of evil genius I suspect he was going for. Now, mate, you don't fit as an alpha wolf, more like a weasel or... I take a sniff, wincing. Skunk, I'd say. I roar my agony at the low-set cement ceiling as a razor-like knife is buried several inches into my right shoulder. It's being pulled back out again isn't a barrel of laughs either. I gulp down desperate mouthfuls of air as it resumes its two-step choreography in front of my iris, panting, physically broken. I look past its vanishing point to the insane little shit spawn wielding it. Okay, I'll tell you, I whine, struggling to draw in enough whistling breath to make my words audible. A punctured lung will do that to the best of men. I am definitely not the best of men. He leans forward, without the knife ever leaving its threatening proximity. Greed for forbidden knowledge is carved more clearly on his pock-marked, grubby features than his rubbish attempts at runes are on my body. I'm so goddamn sexy. I wish I could have switched eyes with your mother to watch myself fuck her brains out last night. Cadorna. Pithy put down issued. I slam my head forward, embedding the blade's tip deep into my brain. Then, accompanied by the sweet, sweet lullaby of his screams of impotent rage, I die. Again. And that is the first chapter of Imperfect Magic. How are we doing for time, Melinda?
I want to hear the next one. I have to say that I love urban fantasy. I've read a lot of the Dresden series. I kind of fell out of love with it after a certain point, but I'm gonna be buying this after the show. I loved I don't know if you've heard Benedict Jackson had the series set in London. I can't remember the name of the series, but I read that too. Alex Verus, I loved that. This has kind of the Alex Verus, but with a little bit more edge. And I just can't think of some of the other ones. And I read the Iron Druid up to a point, and then it started to be sort of dumb. I'm sorry. I loved Iron Druid up to a point, and then it started trying to be funny when, like, before it was funny and it didn't need to try, and then it was trying really hard to be funny and the story stopped making sense, and I was like, yeah, no. But it also has, like, I also like Sandman Slim by Richard Kadri, and this has kind of like Alex Verus and like Sandman Slim. We put them in a blender because it has the edge of Sandman Slim, but without. Sandman Slim gets a little more like darker, apocalyptic. But you got kind of his sense of humor when he's not depressed about how horrible his life is. But like with Alex Verus is like, well, maybe it'll work out. A little more. This is. I am the fan that you were writing for.
Brilliant. That's wonderful news. I've had, some of the descriptions in some of the reviews, I've had, Harry Dresden, if he grew up, was what one Amazon reviewer described it as. And there's definitely, you'll find there's depth to the series as well. The first chapter is very snarky, but there is, we certainly investigate why an 800-year immortal might be quite so snarky, and perhaps, in a sort of, certainly with a Sandman Slim, is a good point of reference for it. That perhaps there is some damage under the surface that is responsible for why he is like that. Okay, so question: what would you like now? There's all sorts of interesting stuff. He's got his whole team with him. There's Aisha Kandisha, who is also an immortal. In fact, it's a team of 3 immortal heretics. Aisha Kandisha, who is really the badass of the series, his best mate, a Moroccan princess who left and hooked up with the Druze, another heretical tribe in Lebanon, Syria way, who still exists today, and who became the guardian of the Arb al-Hayat, and is a traumatized but full of pop culture character. But anyway, we get into more. But I like to do a bit of one of my villains or one of my monsters.
Sure.
So as I say, there's either I can give you a psychic river monster who thinks he's a Shakespearean Fabian, or I can give you a giant snail dragon with a speech impediment. What would you like to have?
I kind of want to hear both. I told you I'm not the right person to ask.
Okay, well let's see how time allows. I'll start with the river monster then. So Frank lives as well. Normally in my world, each of the talented holds a piece of territory, and Paul holds the city of Toulouse, and all of the places in my books are visitable, and they're real places, down to all the bars and cafes and everywhere that they go to. They're all real places you can go to, and you can follow his path through the cities of Toulouse and stuff. Anyway, he shares Toulouse because when he came back after a period away in a mess, for reasons we don't know in book one, he found Frank living in the river, and they struck a deal. And Frank possesses the homeless of the city. If they swear allegiance to him, he can watch through their eyes, and they become like his spies. And in exchange, he keeps them from the worst of the miseries. Although he feeds on their misery, he doesn't keep them from misery, but he stops the misery from killing them. So they won't die of starvation, they won't die of the cold, they won't die of an overdose. They'll suffer, but they won't die. And that's the deal he offers them. So
that's not a bad deal.
It's not, but it is still miserable. And this is why they struck the deal between him and Paul. But we'll stop. So Paul has gone looking for him to get some information, thinking that possibly Frank might have set him up when he got caught in the shit wizard's lair. Light streams overhead, hitting the Pont Chameau's metal frame. It forms a shadow bridge, extending from the opposite bank almost to our feet, a pathway for dark business and nighttime dealings that translocates into early morning. Where it touches our side of the bank, a large, pale hand covered in tight black curling hair reaches up out of the water towards us. Another appears, perpendicular to the water's edge, almost with an arm as thick as my leg. Along with an arm as thick as my leg. A black coat swaddles it, an elbow the same translucent white as the hand poking through the frayed fabric. Then Frank heaves himself out of the water to stand before us. Frank is powerful in all senses of the word. He's also ugly as sin, inside and out. He towers over me, well over 2 meters tall and equally broad. His black Cordovan hat is battered, its brim only allowing a peek of the thin white band circling its cake-like crown. Knot tangled locks stream out wildly underneath. His coat billows, a badly patched tent of black reaching to knees the size of hydrant bonnets. Just as worn out are his trousers. Black boots poke from the ragged hems, nondescript except for their bulk, which seem to demand that they are a custom job. He is easily a size 20 if I had to take part in some weird guess the size of the monster's feet competition. His face is swollen and bulbous, his nose a stained wreck, cratered with acne scars. His ruined proboscis and bushy eyebrows seem to have come to some sort of arrangement, teaming up to hide his eyes, at least partially. The rest of his skin would reduce the most confident of dermatologists to a quivering wreck, and his grin reveals a dentistry emergency. Broken, rotten teeth, lined skinny lips so leached of colour they have turned a diseased mint green sheen. There is something of that shade to his colour generally, the same one fish gain by living far below depths frequented by man, where the sun's touch dies away and pigmentation is an unnecessary eccentricity. I often feel like he is kin to those creatures, ancient, and with no love for those who live in the light. He is of the shadows and the hidden depths. Then there is his power. For those who are talented, looking at Frank, even without looking, will reveal snatches of the creature behind the veil, a momentary view of a nightmare manufactured in the corner of their eye by an overactive imagination. Briefly, the broken teeth will sharpen to points, the back of hairy hands will become more like furred scales, and vague webbing will snatch at one's attention as he gestures. The cloak's wafting movements aren't in sync with the air currents, seemingly suspended, floating around him. His hair moves similarly, and those knots in the tangled mass appear, for an instant, more like air sacs embedded in waving kelp strands than unkempt hair. The eggshell eyes are the same ones that pop into the faces of those he possesses, but he isn't blind. He just thinks things like ambient light and pupils are unnecessary luxuries, I guess. Aisha and I have discussed Frank's origins many times. General consensus is he must be the offspring of a troll and a naiad. Contemplating the logistics of such a coupling makes me want to hit myself repeatedly in the eyes with a claw hammer. I wonder how much of a role love, or even consent, played in that particular coupling. Little would be my guess, based on his personality and preferences. Isaac believes Frank to be a naiad, that is a relative of the Morioch, or the Kelpie, as they're known throughout the Gaelic world. I've not seen him in equine shape or in any guise other than the one standing in front of me. I don't believe he has revealed even half his secrets during the time I've known him, so anything is possible. It isn't like we head to the pub to sink a few pints together. We only meet up when I have no other choice. Frank leers down at us, his broken teeth nauseatingly stained columns standing out against the blackness of his gullet.
Well met, pretty man. The swordling too, though I think I sense mistastings of my aroma, yes? Did the midge wing sting harder than your mightiness was expecting then, lordling?
I swear there's a gleam in his eye, but Frank has his own particular and very annoying turn of phrases. There isn't enough there for me to be sure he's betrayed me. Aisha clearly doesn't feel the same way. In a swift movement, she pulls her longest knife and within an eye blink has it pressed against the creature's throat. I draw my sword an instant later, crackling green talent edging wrapping round the razor-sharp blade. Frank expands, trickles of power cracking through his disguise before threatening to flood out, a hammer blow of an aura all around him as a huge cutlass springs to his hand. It is rust stained, as though it has slept at the bottom of the sea in a sunken pirate ship for eons untold. The monster underneath peeks through properly. A creature that will send most screaming and weeping to the asylum, their minds shredded by the sight.
Is it today, then, my beloveds? Is it the day when we're trialing and testing the breakery of compact expanding, eh? Will we make our blades to sing their carols, little endless ones, see what cha-la-line they can bring, unless it makes you, but I'll stand true-formed and open-paged if this is the moment in which we slip ourselves into, eh? What insult is your doing to honesty me, ill-wounded by such active disgustings? Poor I, is it not?
Aisha doesn't blink throughout this, action readied, but my eyes are on the blade. It radiates power like a suddenly uncloaked lantern in the pitch black of a starless night. I feel I understand some of Frank's phrasing, for it seems to sing a song of misery and death and a desire to drink deep of both. Aisha will not move, will not hesitate, but I fear what effect that weapon might have even against one such as her. All forces have an equal opposite, and the water of life she drank to gain her immortality so many centuries ago might yet not succeed against a sword soaked in liquid, baptized death. Did you set me up, Frank? I ask, direct and to the point. There is a slight widening of those full moon globes. Not much, but enough for me to know. It wasn't him.
Set you up, manling? No. Here is my shimmery metal presence, my waterlogged siren singer. If I comes for you, hopper, or you'll find febrile thrown up mabrica so quick to be, you'll know that the night is a calling and ready for the midnight jiggery. Mean timings.
His blade vanishes, and he shrinks back down to his normal form.
I'm this shelled shaping that greets you with a hungriness to be knowing the mismovings that led to such activities.
And that is the monster called Frank.
Such a name for such a creature.
Well, an interesting one, and I think the idea of where it came from, and it is Frank spelled with a C, which of course was the original French people, which is a story in and of itself, the Frankish. But also I like the idea that he is, of course, anything other than Frank. He is not Frank at all. He is completely strange and talks these nonsensical, semi-poetical phrases that sort of do make sense underneath. He is a non-plain speaking villain, and I like that he was therefore called Frank.
Yeah, no, it's a fun understatement. That, yeah, I like that.
So, how are we doing for time? Are we done for readings? Do you want one more? I'm up to you. It's up to you.
Well, you said you've also got a lot to talk about too. I would love another one, but we've also got things to talk about. So it is up to you. This is your interview.
No. It was your show, and I insist you do. You want to get into chatting? I am more than happy to chat always.
Then let's do some chat since we haven't done that. I've been very much enjoying the readings, and I saw that you actually narrate the audiobook. I've got it all queued up on Audible after this. I'm going to be purchasing it. Like I said, this is like, I've been looking for something because I really hated the way Sandman Slim ended. I still haven't read the last book in it, but I didn't like where we were going the last two books. Like, I don't know.
I've got to admit, I'm not sure where I got to. I'm at least a book behind. Since I've started publishing, I haven't had time to read anything but other indie authors. So even authors I love, like Richard Kadri and Shayna McGuire's released X number of books, and I just have not had time to read any of them. However much I adore them. So yeah, I do remember the last one didn't quite grab me as much as some of the other stuff.
Yeah.
I mean,
I think the penultimate best book was when he was in hell for a year and ruling the place. When he came back to Earth, like after that, it kind of lost something. The book was so epic. The ending.
Well, I sort of felt that was the ending of the series.
It wasn't though. Yeah,
I thought it felt like a natural ending for it. I must confess, it's something I'm battling with slightly, in the sense that my story is divided. My series is divided into arcs, and the first 6 books, which are on quick release, is the first arc. There is going to be 15 books in the entire series, so 6 books. And then 3 trilogies. He does his counting maths on his fingers. 3 trilogies that will come after that. And the end of book 6, the end of the first arc is so dramatic, to the point it kind of choked me up as I was going back through rereading it to do the edits. And again, before I sent it, when I went through it, before I sent it to my editor. So I was like,
so let's talk a little bit more. Like, what is the first arc? What is the overall, is the character changing? Are they achieving something? Like, what is that what is that overall arc in that first 6 books? And then we can touch on the ones after that.
I am loath to say.
Oh, okay, that's a spoiler.
What we can certainly say is we certainly explore why Paul is the way he is, and perhaps we see more of the person he really is under the snark. There is this whole sort of thing where he's very snarky and he refers to himself all the time as being less than a good man, and that he is, he's not the perfect anymore, and actually he's a bit of a bastard, and all of this sort of thing is the way. But actually, he's not really. He actually is a good man, and he actually is always trying to do the right thing, and he often pays the price for it. And we see those prices perhaps become heavier and heavier, and the struggle become harder and harder. And yeah, he gets put through the ringer quite a lot, one might say. The importance of friends, the importance of the family that we choose and create for ourselves. Found family is a strong theme, the fact that there is always a price to be paid for our actions, good or ill. That is probably the overriding theme of the arc, I would say.
And then the second arc, what would you say is going to be the overarching theme of that one?
Again, it's difficult to say without kind of giving it away. Yes. The repaying of debts, or the debts that we place on ourselves, perhaps. Yes. And I can't go any further than that.
Oh, okay. No, that's fair. That's fair.
But what I can promise you is there is a very definite idea where the story is going to, and where the story will finish. And obviously after those 15 books, I'm not saying, I will never revisit the characters or anything, but that will be the end of the narrative arc as I see it. And I will probably might write some more stuff in the same world. There's plenty of characters who are crying out for their own series and keep shouting at me that they would quite like a spin-off, please. So that's always a possibility. And I've got lots of other book ideas in my head, but I will promise get the first 15 books done before I start playing around with any of that sort of stuff. And I have written the first 8 so far, 7 and 8. I'm just editing 7 at the moment to go to my beta readers. And I did a quick novella. There's a novella coming out after book 6. And then it'll be 7 and 8, 9, and 9 have started, but I need to write fully. So we're a good way done. There's quite a lot done, and it's going to keep coming.
No, that's awesome. Oh, maybe your characters have more store for you because you just froze literally as you were talking about maybe doing spin-off books. That's happened in a few other interviews where authors started talking about like what they're going to do after their current one, like freeze. So either it's the characters who are like, we've got plans for you.
Well, I can definitely say I would not mess with Aisha. If Aisha's got plans that she wants me to deal with, I'm just going to do what Aisha says. She's frankly terrifying. I would not mess with her under any circumstances.
Sounds like a fun character.
She is a fun character. She is the character that everybody falls in love with. Absolutely. So,
do we meet her in book 1, or do we have to wait?
We absolutely do. No. She is along for the ride. We meet her in chapter 2, and in fact, chapter 4 is the flashback to how they first met, which is in La Rochelle in 1945. Because in fact, La Rochelle, bizarrely, and again, I try and weave in a lot of these kind of historical oddities that I stumble across. So this is actually a fact that for a year after France was liberated in the Second World War, La Rochelle remained in German hands. And La Rochelle
really?
is on the opposite side of the country from Germany. Just this one little town remained in German hands under a kind of a blockade, but the blockade was rubbish. The Germans kept flying a plane in every week, restocking them, and they had a submarine port. Although to be fair, there was pretty complete, kind of dominance of the seas by this point. But this genuinely happened, and for a year they just left La Rochelle be. So I create a magical reason as to why that might happen, which is the result of the flashback chapter. He says chapter 3, it might be chapter 4.
Okay.
Chapter 4 of the book. He says after consulting the chapter list.
I would love to know what the real world reason was for it. Like, why Germany hung on to that one town. Was it just like, well, we did it because we could to be spiteful, or was there a reason?
It wasn't worth it. I think, to be honest, the Allies just decided it wasn't worth the expenditure. They were pushing in the opposite direction.
So they just left it.
Advancing, and they were like, it's just not worth it. They're not doing anything. They're not about to sort of launch some sort of, counter-attack breaking out. And, you know what I mean? It's just, it's just an isolated town. We'll leave it and we'll mop them up when time allows, I think was probably the logic behind it, particularly because the submarine port was next to, submarine pen, was next to useless by that point because, the Allies had full dominance of the seas. They weren't about to start, attacking British ships or anything. The worst they were going to do was jump on board and try and steam across to South America, maybe. But that was the the highlight of their possible escape maneuvers. So I think that's probably the real world reason. But I created a slightly more interesting and magical reason as to why that might be.
So we have to wait till we read chapter 4 to find out.
Absolutely.
Is that the I want to give away a spoiler, but I'm afraid of the character's reaction if I do?
Always. I said that Aisha is a character who has been traumatized. Aisha is absolutely a badass, and she is hilarious, and she is the one with the best insults, the best one-liners. She also, and basically, it's not really a spoiler to say that she was held captive. The Nazis somehow managed to capture her, and they have held her for 5 years in La Rochelle, kind of, and it's a Ananebe. The Ananebe were one of the Nazi, the real kind of chaos magic elements of the SS that Himmler created. There were two main ones: the Thule Society and the Ananebe. And the Ananebe were even nastier than the Thule Society. And the whole thing with Aisha is she regenerates instantly. You cut a finger off, it just regrows. And so they basically spent 5 years first trying to torture her to find out where the water of life is, which doesn't work, and then just torturing her just to see how, what effect they can have, how much can they torture her, and that she still regrows. So she's been through basically 5 years of hell, and is basically suffering from PTSD. And Paul and his mentor, Isaac the Blind, who is his sort of father figure in his second life, magical life, and the inventor of Kabbalah, and also shares his body with a Bene Elohim, one of the Jewish angels. He and Paul have kind of helped Aisha to sort of readjust and return to living again, and thus why she is fiercely loyal to them. But part of her way of dealing with it has been to sort of immerse herself. She's used the escapism of modern culture, as a form of self-healing, because obviously it's a very difficult one to go and discuss with a psychotherapist. The Nazis held me captive for 5 years and tortured me to the limits of my immortality is likely to get you locked up in a mental hospital, or for them to try, it would fail miserably with Aisha. So she has to do her own way. And so she's very versed in pop culture and makes lots of references to sort of various films or music or comics or stuff, particularly sort of from the 80s, but before, and 90s and modern times as well, the things that have captured her interest and stayed with her. So yeah, there's a lot of that. But yeah, she
Wow.
is a character.
That's an incredible backstory.
Yes, and what's really interesting, so again, she
Yeah.
also, Aisha Kandisha, is a real myth. My wife is French of North African origin, and one of the reasons why I felt, with dual heritage children, very much wanted the representation, and why I wanted a North African character. And Aisha Kandisha is basically Candyman for the North African community. She's very much, if you have a dream of Aisha Kandisha or you see her, it's an ill omen. It's a sign of death or misery to come, and she's a huge source of superstition within the sort of North African community. But when I started digging into her, what I found is that Aisha Kandisha probably existed. Kandisha is actually a bastardization of Contessa, the Portuguese word for countess, and she was a countess in Al Jadida, which is a town just below Casablanca, which is super cool because Casablanca is one of the areas my wife's family comes from, my wife's mother, she was a countess in this town, and there was a lot of problems at that time with Portuguese raiders. And the story goes, she saved her town, saved tens of thousands of lives by using her feminine wiles to seduce the Portuguese raiders and then lead them into a trap. And that this is how they kept the people alive. And of course, because of that, yes, the Arab world was clearly the most enlightened part of the world at that particular point in history. But women who use their physical body, even to save people's lives, have always been treated a certain way by the patriarchal society afterwards. And so I really liked it. So because of this, she ended up becoming this kind of this demon, this jinn, this Ifrit in North African Arabic legend. And I loved this idea of reclaiming her, of reclaiming Aisha and making her a hero again, and making her the person that people love and that people talk about with great love and fun and admiration, and the character that everyone falls in love with. So yeah, this is the rehabilitation of Aisha Kandisha is a part of having created her as a character.
Oh wow. What did your wife think of that?
Yeah, well, initially she funnily enough, when she was like, well, you can't use Aisha Kandisha, like it really is a big thing. And funnily enough, we talked about if it gets translated into French, it's going to take some persuading for the Moroccan community to get on board, possibly with that version of Aisha Kandisha. But she did the research with me. She looked into the stories, and she understood, and she loved it. She loved that idea as well of reclaiming, Aisha, and re-empowering her as a feminist icon. Absolutely love that.
Oh wow. Did she have any input on the character?
Oh, I mean, totally. I mean, there's definitely elements of my wife in the character. Aisha is very much a mixture of my wife and my best friend, who my best friend, who is the banter between Paul and Aisha is me and my best friend. She is totally, that part is, decades of us and our banter. So that's very much influenced by that. But there is definitely strong undercurrents of my wife in Aisha's character. Definitely.
Does your wife see those? What does she think of that?
My wife hasn't read my stories yet.
Oh, is she going to?
She is going to. We are toying with the idea of translating them into French together. She had lots of her own projects on those, so it's about the time and everything. And because of that, we've looked at the novella. She's done a little bit of work on that. She sort of got stuck on that and therefore not progressed. But and remembering that English isn't her native language, she speaks a fabulous level of English, but it's not her native language. And my text is quite dense at times and quite,
sweary.
Quite sweary. But there is some quite what's the word I'm looking for? Yeah, things like Frank. Frank's a very difficult thing to understand. Frank's difficult to understand if you're an English speaker, let alone if you're not. But she was saying what she's going to try and do, perhaps, she's thinking about doing is to listen to the audiobooks, which she thinks will be an easier process, perhaps. So that's the thing. Yes, eventually she will read them. It's not her genre, which obviously is another factor, but she will eventually, I'm sure.
So we can get an update in the future on her reaction. So I'm curious. And she can ask you questions if she doesn't understand, because you're right there.
That's exactly the plan. And obviously, being set in France, whether we will work it out, whether it's plausible or not. I obviously would love for it to be translated into French. I am now. I have my French citizenship. I live in France. So getting it, and it's all set in France with French characters, French mythology, French history. So I would love to get it translated into French. It's just a question of whether we do it ourselves and then do it independently, or whether should it be, hopefully the way it's going, it's doing very, very well. We're number one at the moment in the darkly humorous comedy, I think, on the Amazon US and Amazon UK charts, with the sale on at the moment. So it's going really well. Should that continue to build, perhaps we'll look to try and do this hybrid maneuver where you get a French trad house to do the French side of it and stay in beyond the English language. I don't know. These are all things to consider in the future if it goes the way that, fingers crossed, we're hoping it does.
No, that's cool. That's great that it's doing so well. That's awesome.
Yeah, I feel much better than I could have dreamed. It's going fabulous, and I feel very, very fortunate. So fingers crossed it keeps going the same way.
Yeah, and you're part of the self-published fantasy blog of number 9 this year, right?
I am in the fantasy faction subheading.
Yeah, so you're in their cohort.
Yes, I am. And actually, my whole release schedule was built around SPFBO9, on the grounds that I knew I wanted to go in. I desperately wanted to take part. So I was always sure I wanted to release book 1. The release date of book 1, May the 8th, was because I wanted to make sure that it qualified to be entered into this year's SPFBO contest. So very exciting. Incredibly difficult. The quality of certainly my group, I must be honest, I haven't really looked wider than my group, but the quality of my group's offerings is fabulous. So yeah, I certainly don't think I'll make it very far. If I can make it to being a semi-finalist, I would be delighted. We shall see.
Yeah, I don't know how far I'll get either. They entered this guy, Cursebreaker Enchanted.
Woo!
My epic fantasy series. Then the character who will not let me write about anybody else shows up in every book. I to write about somebody else. This is how tenacious he is. He's really quiet, like nice, like that he's the quiet one you have to worry about.
Right.
So I had to set it in an alternate timeline where he died because just so he couldn't show up. So then his son showed up, and I was like, okay, we just can't escape.
He's on board. He's there every time.
Oh yeah. I was like, wait, you weren't supposed to be in this book. But then I was like, I can't get rid of you because now you showed up and now the whole setting changed and we're now where you live. So now you can't not be in the book.
Yeah.
I just, every time I try to get out, they suck me back in.
He's Don Corleone of the epic fantasy world.
Yeah. But much nicer, but very just it's just wild. He has so much magic though. I think that's how he does it. He just warps things so he can show up. I haven't figured it out yet, but someday I will figure out how he ends up in I've written 21 books across 5 series and he's in every single one. Somewhere just shows up and I can't get rid of him because it's illogical that he would be there. He's just like, he's like, wait, no, I can't get rid of you because it would make sense that you were there. So, damn it.
At least he's nice about it. At least he's polite about writing himself in. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
It makes it make logical sense rather than, you're having to then deal with plot holes or whatever. So that's good news.
Yeah, no, he showed up and fixed a plot hole. I was like, wait, whoa. Now I can't get rid of you. That's not fair. I can't take you out of this book because you fill a plot hole very nicely. It was exactly your shape and size. How did that happen? Characters. We can't live without them, and books wouldn't be good without them either. So we're kind of stuck.
This is definitely true.
All right, I got a couple of questions. So, how does he? So this whole him coming back to life thing. How does one go from being a 12th century priest to suddenly like reincarnating every time people die? And why does he reincarnate in like the nearest dead body? And does he look like the nearest dead body? Does he look like himself? Because like
the how, or rather, the why is the cause of the flashbacks in the first book. Apart from the one where he goes and rescues Aisha, the rest of the flashbacks are to the Albigensian Crusade, and we find out why. We find out what we meet Paul in his first life, prior, in fact, to him discovering anything about magic, and then we find out why eventually through that. As to the how, he wakes up in the nearest dead body, and the magic, he doesn't fully understand it himself, to be honest. It seems to be part of the sort of integral part of his talent. People who see it will forget about it. People will forget the missing body. They won't go looking for it. No one's going to get concerned that there's no body in the casket. It all just seems to happen naturally. And over a relatively swift period of time, the body starts to look like him. His magic, he basically seems to put up an illusion first, like a constant spell that he runs to make it look like him, and then over time the body starts shaping and very rapidly becomes the body he expects. The only difference is it takes a while before it catches up on the fitness level. So often the body's feeling pretty pudgy and out of shape, even if it looks like him, and it takes a while for the muscles to remember, what it's like to run up and down mountains. But he can kind of overcome that with his magic.
So what happens because the body died? So there was.
The body disintegrates. It disintegrates after death. And again, people who see it kind of have a moment of like, what the fuck? Good Jesus Christ!
So he disintegrates when he dies, and then but when he reincarnates in the new body, like it was dead. Like, organs might have been punctured. Exactly. Liver might be hardened.
Exactly. And the magic kind of heals his body. Kind of puts it.
Okay. Is it like all at once, or he wakes up and he's feeling pretty horrible?
It feels like there's a moment when he's feeling a bit grim, but it very quickly, within a matter of seconds, it kind of flips it back in. And in fact, the chapter 2 is him waking up in the morgue with the morgue attendant leaning over him, and there's a moment where the morgue attendant looks pretty fucking horrified, and he just sort of sits up and scares the life out of the guy, and he just keeps the forward moving going, so he headbutts him and knocks him unconscious. But like he then checks him to make sure he's okay, fixes the guy's teeth, and he's on first name terms with him. He knows Pascal very, very well indeed, because he's knocked him out repeatedly. But every time Pascal then wakes up, he doesn't ask himself a question. He doesn't ask himself why he was lying on the floor. Doesn't ask himself why he got knocked out. He's forgotten about the body that's disappeared. He just cracks on with the rest of his day. And nobody asks any questions about why this body has disappeared. No one's coming asking. Just reality seems to almost rearrange itself around to rearrange itself to take notice of the new Paul body.
So it just erases his records from the computer system that he was even in the morgue.
Almost, yeah. It's almost more like just nobody asks. There's almost this brand of the talent where it's almost like a don't look here spell. It's just people just don't go looking for it. People don't ask. People will if it's in terms of a police investigation, they just won't look for the body anymore. If it's someone's relative, it will just be a closed cask, and nobody will notice and nobody will notice that that the casket's light, or ask questions about why it was a closed casket when they planned on it being an open one. Reality just kind of, rather than kind of completely solo, it just does little nudges so as to turn people's attention away, so they just stop noticing that this body has gone missing.
I see.
which is a
I see.
good thing, because considering the amount of times that Paul gets himself killed, he'd leave a pretty fucking massive trace across the French administrative system, if not.
It might be fun in a future book if somebody is immune to that, don't notice, and reality can't rewrite them, and they start noticing, putting this all together. He could have quite a challenge on his hands eluding that person.
Such a thing, not quite, but there is something that comes up not a million miles away from that in book 3, which I can't tell anymore.
Oh, nope, don't spoil it. I'll get there.
But book 3 just came. Yeah, book 3 just came out this week on Thursday, the 6th of July. So it's there. It's available on all formats. So yes, you can find out.
No, because that would be like fun.
Yes. There is certainly, let's say, there is certainly some fun to be had from the mechanics of it later on in the series, shall we say?
Oh, good. I like when the character has something interesting, but later on somebody catches on, and it kind of reduces that advantage that they had, and that can be fun. It can lead to a fun game of cat and mouse. I mean, for me. I don't know that the characters enjoy that, but I do.
Well, if you like cat and mouse, there is an awful lot of twisty, turny mystery throughout these books. I don't think, funnily enough, the only person who I've known who's worked. I know, I'm not even going to I'm not even going to, because otherwise it's going to spin. But there is lots of very twisty, turny mysteries, and people always say they didn't see the twists coming.
I like that. I like not seeing the twist. I read a book earlier this week where it was very weird. It like they were trying to do like a frame story, but they chose for the frame the last 25% of the book. So, and then they did like flashbacks to like how we got there, and in between the flashbacks was basically the last 25% of like the story. So I knew like from chapter 1 that this character was going to die. So we finally got the flashbacks caught up to the frame story of them, the whole conflict. I was like, okay, it had no emotional impact. I was like, okay, you're dead. But I knew for like the last 200 pages that you were going to die, that there was no getting out of it. It was such a cool world. I was so mad that like, because they killed off the protagonist, like that we were never, this was going to be obviously a standalone one shot. And I was like, it was such a cool premise. I was like, damn it. I'm angry that this is that, and that there wasn't, because like in that kind of thing, like often with like, this wasn't a thriller or anything. This was like a cowboy, like apocalyptic kind of thing. It was called Corporate Gunslinger. It was an interesting concept, and I really wish they had told it in chronological order from like this person getting into this situation to be a gunslinger for an insurance agency, and like we just naturally progressed the story. Or if they were going to do this whole weird, let's tell you the ending first, then at least not have it go to the ending that they're building up to, like do some kind of fun twist. Like if you're going to use the thriller format of storytelling, then give me the damn twist, the payoff. So but like I said, I love twists, and I get mad when they're not there, when it's leading up to there being some kind of twist and there just isn't one, and I'm like, okay.
What I can also promise as well is they're not ridiculous twists. There is always reason and meaning behind them, and they are never kind of you will always, hopefully there's sort of twist that you then go back and you reread and you go, oh yeah, well, obviously.
Sometimes that's fun too. Like that you didn't see it coming, but it was there. So I like that too. When you read and you're like, oh damn, it was there and I missed it. So I like both. I like the going back and you still can't see it coming, even though you know it's coming. And the others, and when you go back and reread and you know it's coming and you do see it and you're like, damn it, I missed it. It was there. I like both scenarios,
There is a bit of both. There's some of the twists are like that, some of the twists are like the other. So there'll always be something in each book to keep you guessing and to keep you slightly off balance.
I like that. I like that a lot. So all right. So so what exactly is, so we said that his world is under threat, that there's somebody behind it. Like, what is the danger? What is the threat? that he
So
is.
the whole point, we read the first chapter, and he's saying he's basically, the first chapter opens up and he's there in this basement of the guy who gets, the poor fella who gets christened the shit wizard, because he's just a shit wizard. The whole point is Paul is miles out of his league in terms of talent, but he's been trapped by these angelic runes.
Oh,
And what we
okay.
find now is that, without, I don't think it's a particularly big spoiler, so, basically there are only two people in the whole of history who have actually sort of shared a body with an angel who are capable of doing this. One is Isaac, his mentor and father figure, and one is Jacob, Isaac's brother, long lost missing brother. And basically, who or how is it Jacob? Has Jacob gone evil? Has someone managed to grab control of Jacob, and his angel Nanael? And in which case, what the fuck? Because the angels are effectively the most powerful thing on our plane of existence.
Yeah.
So how has someone managed to do that? So that is the threat. Somebody has somehow got hold of angelic powers, which should be impossible, and nobody can work out how.
And we don't know what the person who got hold of that wants or is trying to do, what their plan is.
Except that they do find out, and then the said person starts them off in a game of basically hunting things down for him if they want any further information. So, yeah, I don't want to give too many spoilers.
No, that's one of it's one of my favorite tropes in like the military thrillers, is that somebody knows but they won't tell you exactly what's going on. You need to go do these jobs for them or get these things. Either they claim they can't give you the information you need without this, and sometimes it's true, and sometimes they just want you to do some jobs for them.
Well, that's it. Yes. So they know there is some sort of malicious bad guy who is pulling the strings. They know there is someone evil who apparently has access to angelic magic, and they have no idea who or why or what he wants. And that is the crux of the mystery in the first book.
No, that's awesome. That is so cool. Is there anything else that you want to say about Imperfect Magic or the sequels or anything? Is we're over an hour. I've got another guest coming on in a little while, so I'm having a lot of fun, but I'm unfortunately going to have to end it soon.
I'd just like to obviously say thanks. I'll tell you what I will do, because obviously we've done the readings, we talked about the audio books, I've self-narrated. I will set up a special code on my Shopify. Can I say the location of my Shopify? I don't know.
Oh, yeah. I'll also have the links in the show notes as well, so people don't have to, scurry for a pen and paper. Especially if you're driving while listening to this, keep driving. It'll be in the show notes. I promise.
For my audiobooks, they're good, but they're not that good. My Shopify, cnrowan.myshopify.com. You can get all my audiobooks at a fraction of the price you pay in most other places. There's 6. I have to have them set at a currency, so it's a set of euros, so it's €6.99, which is what, $7.49 or something. But I'm going to set up a 20% discount code on all of the audiobooks. We'll use the code Melinda. That's nice and easy. So Melinda will give you 20% off on any of the audiobooks there. Otherwise, obviously, you can get the Kindle edition. It's in Kindle Unlimited as well, and the paperbacks are available everywhere, as is the audiobook. The audiobook is wide along with the paperback, so you can get them everywhere, as well as, of course, at your local library or on your library app, which support libraries every time.
So, all right. So if they buy it from your Shopify store, how do they listen to it? How is it delivered? I'm always leery about that. Like, I always want to buy directly from authors, but I'm never sure. Like, how am I, the listener, going to hear the audiobook?
It's delivered by BookFunnel.
Okay.
Know what that is. BookFunnel is a thing we use for delivering advanced copies of books or free novellas and stuff as authors when you sign up for our newsletters. And they've started doing audio as well. So it's very easy. There's an app you install. It's just like your Audible app or anything like that. Or you can listen to it on a browser if you prefer. And if you install the app, it works just like the Audible app.
Yes, it does.
You'll just download it straight onto your book funnel app, which makes it really, really easy. Or as I say, if you prefer not to have the app, you can just listen in a browser.
No, and I have used the app, but I always like to ask because and some people do use BookFunnel for distribution of audiobooks, some don't. So I always want to ask. So to make sure I know, because if I'm buying an audiobook, I want to listen to it right away. So I need to know where to go.
Yeah, you'll have no messing around. There'll be no issues. You'll be able to listen to it straight away.
That's perfect. Although I might just go over to Google Play and get it because I have I think I have a gift card over there. So I have to go see which is the better thing. But
I did put a temporary sale on a couple of places as well. I know it's on sale on Chirp until the 12th, and on Barnes & Noble, he says, possibly somewhere else. So whether it's I don't know if it's on Google or not, but I have tried to put it on sale in a few places just to promote the release of book 3 of Imperfect Fae at I think the same, $6.99, $5.99, something like that. So there is options elsewhere, but that's only until the 12th, and I'll make this Melinda one will be a permanent code to allow you discount of 20% on the books in my Shopify store. And you
I'm probably going to get it from there. No, thank you. This is the first time that there's been a code using my name. I'm kind of excited. I feel like that's an achievement. Like
fame at last.
Little tiny bits. I'll take it. Thank you so much for coming on here.
Linda, it has been a pleasure and a delight. Thank you so much for the invite. I have had a whale of a time. And best of luck to you in SPFBO as well. I look forward to reading your books too.
Oh, thank you. Mine are epic fantasy.
So, I've always got room for a little bit. I do read mainly urban fantasy and supernatural suspense, but I can always take a little deviation off now and then as well when my mountainous TBR list allows me to, obviously. But yes, I will slot them in at some point, definitely.
Oh well, thank you. Mine's a little. It's not the dark. It does get a bit dark some books, but mostly we stay on the not so dark side. But yeah, it's cool. His series has the 10th book just came out a couple of weeks ago. So, but everybody's waiting because the characters decided in the third act that some of them decided they should go off and do this really cool, interesting thing. And I'm like, all right, guys. So I finished, we ended the book and we accomplished the mission, and some of the side characters just went off on their own quest, like at the end. So it felt more like a cliffhanger than an ending because you're like, well, did they find the dragons? Like, well, what happened? And I was like, okay, this has to be a separate book. Because this is not a straightforward, let's go to the dragon cave and say hello kind of situation. This is
never works out that well.
Yeah, no, it feels more like a cliffhanger than a so I know people are waiting for a couple people are like, oh, I'm so happy the next book is out, but I'm gonna wait until the next one comes out because I want to know what these crazy characters are doing, that I want the full thing. So
yeah.
But that's how they get more sequels out of me. They just run off in the end of the third quarter, and what are you supposed to do at that point?
Yeah, the characters are just like, we're not stopping writing us. Keep going. Yeah.
So it is what it is. So we're still putting off the joust that I want to do for yet another book. I'm kind of mad. It's been I've had to postpone it for about 7 books now. Can I just do the joust already? They want to go chase dragons. I'm like, I want to do the joust.
When the dragons come calling, you've got no choice but to go chasing.
I mean, the dragons have lived under the mountain for years. I don't know why we suddenly have to go chase after them. We know where they are. I mean, they don't know exactly which cave the dragon lives in, but they are aware that the dragon is there. I don't know why we had to. I don't know. They just decided that was something they absolutely had to do for plot reasons that they claim they'll make clear to me in the next book. So
well, there you go.
waiting for an answer on that one.
Authority to strike.
I don't know. Like I said, we can't live with characters and we can't live without them. So we need to just chronicle their adventures.
But we can kill them off horribly. So that's always one to have in your back pocket.
Yeah, I don't like killing characters off though, so I'm kind of stuck with them. I need to get meaner. Because there's too many of them. They outnumber me. Anyways, this has been fantastic.
Thank you.
I'm Melinda Kucsera, your indie fantasy author, and we've been talking with C.N. Rowan, the author of Imperfect Magic, and the book sounds like just so much fun. I hope that you're going to go out and get a copy, either in ebook, audiobook, or I think you said Kindle. I know I'm going to be, because this is sort of right up my alley. So you wouldn't know that from the books that I write, but I actually love this kind of stuff.
Marvelous. Well, thank you very much. Yeah, I hope you got them all. The imperfect Cathars series, all formats. And thank you once again for having me on. It's been just a great excitement. Thank you very much.
And you're welcome to come back anytime.
Well, whenever you'll have me, Melinda, great pleasure.
Sure.